Welcome to the PSX Index. The name PlayStation instantly triggers a wave of memories for millions of gamers. For many of us, that grey box, the original PS1, was where polygon worlds became truly immersive, where we met heroes like Solid Snake, Cloud Strife, and where the CD format transformed what a console could do. This show is dedicated to revisiting that era, one definitive title at a time, but to truly measure the scope of the console that defined a generation, we have to look at one staggering number. That number is 1,278. That is the communal agreed upon count of unique original games released in North America's PlayStation 1 catalogue. Not counting re-releases, bundles or unlicensed titles, over 1,200 games that changed gaming forever, and our mission is simple, to index every single one. That number, 1,278, is the foundation of this channel and our mission statement. I'm going to play, analyse and review every single one of those games. Why this monumental task? It's easy to talk about the classics, the Silent Hills, the Metal Gear Solids, the Crash Bandicoots and Resident Evils, but for every common masterpiece, there are dozens of deep cuts and iconic experience that most of us, including me, have completely missed. I've never touched a Final Fantasy game. I've never explored the back catalogue of dozens of those major studios. The PSX Index is here to fix that gap in gaming history. I stream all of this research live on Twitch, utilising the excellent DuckStation emulator for the best enhanced resolution and effects. Then I take that raw investigative journey and distill it down into an analytical experience you hear right now on this podcast. If you believe in the quest to truly understand the world's most definitive gaming library, subscribe and follow along. For our debut entry, game number 1 of the PSX Index, we dive headfirst into the perfect hybrid, Parasite Eve II. Parasite Eve II is an intriguing beast, a genuine cross between the cinematic survival horror of Resident Evil and the deep mysterious DNA of a Final Fantasy RPG. The story puts us back in the combat boots of Aya Brea, the protagonist from the original 1998 cinematic RPG. Here's a piece of trivia for you. The original Parasite Eve story is based on a Japanese horror novel from 1995. The game franchise essentially acts as a sequel to the book, giving Aya a backstory rooted in the science fiction genius. She's immune to the energy that transforms others into grotesque creatures because her own mitochondria is evolving faster than everyone else's. In Parasite Eve II, Aya has moved from the NYPD MIST, the Mitochondrial Investigation and Suppression Team. She's a full-blown operative, and the game instantly shifts from the turn-based style of the first game to a classic fixed-camera survival horror experience. Now, having played this game previously, I didn't want a simple walkthrough. The index demands a challenge, so I chose to play on Nightmare mode. This mode is not a challenge, it is a full-blown commitment to suffering. On Nightmare, our health is significantly lower, and enemies that were minor annoyances on normal mode are now capable of one hit killing us. He didn't. But all we have to worry about is this one guy, and then we're good to go. We can save it in hotel room number 6, and that will be my first ever live stream done. That has never happened. Okay guys, I'm going to call that one a stream now. That is my first ever live stream. Unfortunately it didn't end how I liked it to end. I wanted to get to the hotel room, but we must learn every single enemy move pattern. To top it off, harder late game enemies already start patrolling the opening levels. And if that wasn't enough, we are severely limited on our supplies, leaving us with the weakest weapons for the majority of the game. Our starting weapon, the P08 pistol, feels less like a defense mechanism and more like you're trying to tickle enemies into submission. The damage numbers were pathetic. Our journey begins with the Akropolis Tower disaster. We meet Pierce and Jodie first at the Mist headquarters. We begin our training segment, load up and head out. An early setup goes sideways when SWAT team sent ahead is slaughtered. The first major threat gives us our intro into the real-time battle system. Unlike the first Parasite Eve, we stop to aim like Resident Evil, but the RPG DNA is preserved with the customizable Parasite Energy, PE for short. Using pyrokinesis or healing via metabolism requires careful MP management. Upon finding a civilian, we get a horrific display of what the mitochondria can do as she transforms into a grotesque creature. We rush for backup, but the entire tower is already infested. The creatures seemed manageable until we ran into number 9, a mysterious figure whose appearance immediately escalated the situation. Suddenly the tower was crawling with golems, massive armoured creatures, and remember, we are still armed with the tickle pistol. I managed the first night golem, but then I hit the first great wall of the index, the mossbacks. Fighting those enhanced brutes with the fixed camera angles and the instant death threat was a masterclass in pain. This was the moment the stream realised Nightmare Mode was no joke. After countless runbacks, we finally cleared the tower, only to be ambushed by number 9 on the rooftop. I messed up the initial encounter, resulting in a few tries, but in the end we conquered the fight. Just as number 9 made his escape and the tower was rigged with explosives, we escaped by helicopter, concluding the first mission segment. The investigation continues, leading us to Dryfield, a desolate, dusty, abandoned town that perfectly nails the atmosphere. We search the entire motel, eventually running into Mr. Douglas in his workshop. He becomes our main source of weapons, upgrades and items throughout the Nightmare run. He gives us a key to room number 6, but it was guarded by 2 stinger enemies. It was right here, after taking a punishment one-hit death right before my save point, that I realised I was facing a 30-minute run back. I gave myself a pat on the back for my first stream success and called it a day. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do in survival horror is hit the power button. On my return, we carefully dispatched the stingers, saved and found Kyle Madigan, a private investigator watching down from the watchtower. He was no help, but he did give us some crucial information about the shelter, a mysterious research facility. We report back to Douglas, who was interrupted by a scream coming from the shopping district. It was number 9 again. This time the fight felt easier. Once the pattern was down, the fight wasn't bad. And the reward was a cinematic where Aya collapses, having flashbacks, and wakes up with Kyle standing over her. We decide it's time to make our way to the shelter. Our sedan was destroyed, which leads us to a polite request to borrow a truck from Douglas. This turns out to be a tedious goose chase to find a fuel canister. Once that quest was complete, we decided to rest up at the motel. This is where we ran into the biggest elephant-like enemy yet, the burner. I was expecting pure dread on Nightmare, but here's where the RPG element broke the difficulty curve. Once I realised the burner was weak to necrosis, the parasite energy power, I was happy enough completely spamming the ability and firing away from a safe corner. The fight was genuinely not too bad, proving that sometimes the best tactic isn't combat, it's chemistry. Although most of the motel was destroyed, we were unharmed, and with that we finished the game's first disc. Moving on to disc 2, we take the truck and head to the shelter. At the cave, Kyle gets ambushed by the chasers and goes on ahead, leaving Aya to face the Blizzard Chaser. This was probably the easiest boss in the entire game. He just runs circles around the arena and seemingly misses with most attacks. Dodging was not a problem. With no sign of Kyle, we celebrate a fantastic reward, the P229 pistol, a nice upgrade over the P08 tickle machine. We enter the shelter and immediately get ambushed by a stalker. The rest of the shelter is dedicated to clearing out creatures, leading us to the incinerator and the part of Nightmare Mode I struggled with the most. The gluten is another elephant-sized trash monster that can swallow you whole. The fight immediately exposed a critical flaw in the Parasite Eve II system. the fixed camera lock-on. Trying to aim at the gluten over the other enemies in the tight space was a genuine pain. After struggling with the second phase, I ditched the honourable combat only rule and used the Crusher environmental trap, which saved my sanity but definitely felt like a moment where the game design felt flawed. After getting the medicine wheel and running back into the mysteriously healed Kyle, the true turning point came when we saved Pierce from the swarm of mosquito-like enemies. He rewarded us with his SUV key, granting us access to the best armour in Nightmare mode. With that armour, Nightmare mode truly started to feel much easier. On returning to the shelter, we explored the remaining rooms, dispatched the Stinger, who turns out to be a merged researcher, and then Pierce calls us from the pod room, setting up the final location, Neo Ark. We head down into the Ark, finding ourselves in a scene straight out of Jurassic Park. The mission is to stop the release of the ANMCs, find mission operatives, and discover the truth behind the shelter and Eve. The Ark is one of the tougher areas due to a lack of saves and places to replenish ammo, which felt like a design flaw intended to keep the tension high. We discover the child Eve is mastering the puppet, which we take down. This begins the start of the endgame and the final boss fight of the ultimate being. This is the moment Parasite Eve II truly shines, the final boss chase. It's not a traditional fight, it's a cinematic survival sequence. Upon with some struggles with the final boss, mainly because of the one-hit death encounter, we used our Inferno and quickly dispatched of it, moving us onto the final fight with Eve. Surprisingly, I managed to take down Eve in one try, which was a massive pat on the back for me. The world is safe and the index has completed its first entry. So what's the final verdict for Parasite Eve II? It's a unique fusion. It successfully shifts from an RPG to a survival horror game, blending the real-time combat and unique parasite powers with the fixed camera dread of Resident Evil. As for the atmosphere and art direction, the environments are top-notch. The pre-rendered backgrounds hold up surprisingly well. Aya Brea remains a compelling protagonist. Watching her journey and the eventual bond with Eve is the emotional core of the game. Where the game slips, however, is the tank controls and camera angles. The controls can feel a little stiff and dated, especially in the complex fights with the glutton encounter. Some of the mosquito enemies gave me some trouble. The lock-on wouldn't lock onto the specific one that you wanted it to hit. It would instead aim at the ones on the ground, which can feel a bit frustrating when you've got the ones that are airborne droning in and dealing massive damage. The difficulty of Nightmare mode gives a unique experience. While this isn't the mode that I would recommend first time players to ever play on, it's definitely an experience worth trying if you enjoyed the game on the first playthrough. Once you get the best armour, the tactical vest, it becomes a lot easier and you start acquiring some better weapons, which makes the Nightmare a lot more fun, diminishing the late game tension. Parasite Eve II is a strange but brilliant fusion of horror and action, and just enough RPG DNA to feel fresh. It is atmospheric, challenging and memorable, a definitive PS1 survival horror experience. That concludes episode 1 of the PSX Index. We conquered Parasite Eve II on Nightmare, but we still have 1,277 games left to go. The stream was packed with intense moments and ridiculous deaths, and I want to keep that momentum going. My next game will be a quick, chaotic palate cleanser, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for a few short streams, followed immediately by our next massive conquer game, Metal Gear Solid. If you want to follow along for the entire index, you can find me live on Twitch for the pure gameplay experience. If you prefer the analytical deep dive like this one, subscribe here on YouTube and let me know in the comments what iconic game I should play next. Thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.